An adventurer trudges through the pouring rain, reflecting on the grim turn of events. The weather, once clear, now seems to mirror his bleak mood. He recalls being told that he had to leave the party. In a tavern, the adventurer Alvin was being kicked out of his party. Alvin had asked for a reason. His party leader coldly stated that Alvin should have already predicted why. Alone in the woods as the rain subsides, Alvin wonders just how many times he has been expelled from a party. He arrives at the entrance to a dungeon, noticing the area is deserted. He surmises that a certain rumor must be keeping people away. Alvin knows entering the dungeon is reckless. He checks his supplies, making sure he has potions, antidotes, food, and spare equipment. To continue living as an adventurer, this is his only choice. Steeling his resolve before the dungeon's maw, he concludes that he has no choice but to take down the boss by himself. At the entrance of the Setting Sun cave, he reads the evocative flavor text but dismisses it. He knows brooding will get him nowhere, so he decides to press on. Once inside the Setting Sun cave's first floor, Alvin feels his power surge. Outside, his parameters and skills are useless, but within a dungeon, they manifest fully. As skeletons rise to attack, Alvin feels a surge of confidence. He knows that in here he is different. At level 43, Alvin finds himself on the 11th floor, an area typically reached only by veteran adventurers. He is strong, possessing many skills that let him fight above his level. He considers himself a prodigy, an ideal vanguard for any party. However, as he reaches the 17th floor, he acknowledges there is one crucial factor that changes everything. He encounters a large paralyzing slime and notes that while it's annoying, it drops a lot of coin. The key is to bait a jumping attack to get close and destroy its core in one hit. As the slime stretches to attack, the mucus protecting its core thins, creating an opening. He prepares to strike, using one of the raiding techniques he's worked out. After defeating the creature, Alvin checks for drops. He finds nothing, not a single item. This is his ultimate weakness, the reason he was told the party had already found a swordsman to replace him. In the past, Alvin had argued that his high level and numerous skills were essential to the party. Unimpressed, his party leader challenged him to reveal his status, specifically asking what was at the bottom of his skill sheet. His status revealed the truth, a special skill called drop rate reduction. It causes an 80% decrease in item drop rates, though it doesn't affect boss drops. This is a minor skill, a cursed penalty for those born with many skills. While an ordinary adventurer might get 1 drop for every 10 monsters killed, Alvin gets only 1 for every 50. The more he participates in battle, the more the party's income from drops is reduced. He understands why he's hated and accepts that being evicted is inevitable. He became an adventurer at 14 and leveled up solo to gain enough power to offset his minor skill. Thanks to his other skills, he leveled up rapidly and was able to join parties. He studied monster weaknesses and tried to adapt to different situations. Despite his incredible effort, it was never enough. Alvin takes pride in his effort, but despairs that he's still unable to offset his minor skill. He lets out a heavy sigh. He laments that pure effort can't solve everything in this world. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by a piercing scream. Realizing it's not a monster but a person, he determines the sound is coming from up ahead. Ahead, he sees someone fighting a large number of monsters. He identifies them as yellow goblins. Realizing the danger of facing such a horde, he rushes forward to help. He's surprised to find a single girl battling the goblins, deducing from her equipment that she must be a priestess. Alvin quickly checks on her, asking if she can move and has MP left. He tells her to get up and fix her stance. The flustered priestess apologizes for causing trouble, but he tells her not to worry. He tells her that as fellow adventurers, they're in the same boat. He instructs her to heal herself and focus on her own protection. Worried about the absence of her party members, Alvin decides he must act quickly. He leaps into the fray, swiftly engaging the goblins. As he dispatches more goblins, an arrow flies towards him. He expertly parries the projectile from the goblin archer. Alvin scoffs at their attempt to overwhelm him with numbers. He declares that they underestimate someone used to fighting solo and unleashes a powerful sword skill, Zantetsu. His Zantetsu attack cleaves through 2 goblins and their shields simultaneously. Spotting the last one running past him, he shouts a warning to the priestess. The priestess bravely smashes the final goblin with her staff. Alvin stares, thinking about the potential lack of drops. She expresses her relief that they managed to defeat them all. After the battle, they find a safe point where she introduces herself as Kakal, and he as Alvin. Alvin asks why she is exploring the dungeon alone. He worries that the rest of her party may have been wiped out. Kakal clarifies that her party didn't collapse. Kakal explains she was solo from the start. Alvin is shocked, exclaiming that it's the first time he's ever seen a priestess on her own. She tells him she couldn't find anyone willing to party with her, which he points out is precisely the issue with being so reckless. Kakal decides it would be easier to just show him her status screen. Alvin protests, warning her not to show her detailed status to a stranger, but she insists she doesn't mind. Alvin is left completely bewildered by her casual attitude. Alvin is stunned to see that Kakal is level 80. He wonders if his help was even necessary, but she insists he was a lifesaver. More importantly, she directs his attention to her skills sheet. He notes she has many good skills. He is puzzled by one he's never heard of, Usurper of the Severed Head. Kakal quietly informs him that it is a minus skill. Kakal explains that her incredibly high level is a direct result of her minus skill. Alvin is surprised to hear this. She confirms that the skill's effect is quite simple. She reveals that when another party member kills a monster, she is always considered the one who did the killing. Alvin asks if the actual member still gets drops and experience, which she confirms they do. However, she points out that the biggest issue is the kill bonus. Alvin realizes the bonus experience awarded to the killer is claimed entirely by her. An infographic illustrates how all kill bonuses and experience are redirected to her. Because her skill steals all the bonus experience, her party members level up much slower, which is why she gets expelled from parties. Alvin suggests she could join a party focused on item gathering instead of leveling up. Sadly, Kakal reveals there's an additional penalty to her skill. Skills that activate after a kill, such as increased drop rate, no longer resolve for the party member who executed the kill. The skill's full description confirms that skills that exhibit effects after the kill do not resolve. Not only does it steal experience, but it also renders useful skills useless. Kakal asks if it isn't a horrible spell. Alvin finds himself at a loss for words, unsure how to reassure her. Kakal apologizes for the sudden topic, but prepares to ask a favor. She asks Alvin if he's aware of the rumor that the boss of Setting Sun Cave drops a skill-erasing item. She admits she came for that item, but realized it would be impossible to fight the boss alone, while Alvin feels he may have overlooked something important. Alvin has a sudden, stunning realization. He wonders what would happen to his own drop rate reduction skill, which is also a post-kill effect. As Kakal explains she doesn't need a party, he tries to calm his racing heart. Kakal offers Alvin all other rewards if he'll help her get the skill-erasing item. As she makes her impolite request, Alvin seems to be deep in thought. He suddenly interrupts her, shouting her name. He grabs her by the shoulders and impulsively asks her to form a party with him, completely missing her earlier request. They stand on the 17th floor of the Setting Sun Cave. She suggests they could have been temporary allies, but Alvin insists she shouldn't worry and asks her to try a few battles with him. After she agrees, she offers him a buff. The solo outcast feels the reassurance of having a comrade. Kakal shouts a warning, but Alvin says buffs aren't needed yet. He sees the paralyzing slime as an opportunity. He declares it's a perfect chance to test his hypothesis. With Kakal in his party, Alvin attacks the slime. He desperately hopes his theory is correct. He strikes the core, shattering it. The defeated slime bursts into a shower of coins. Alvin stares in wide-eyed disbelief. Kakal is equally astonished by the massive item drop. Kakal is amazed by his skill in defeating the slime in one hit. Alvin is still unsure if his theory is proven. After defeating a group of yellow goblins, they are again rewarded with a normal item drop. Kakal examines the rare antidote. Alvin thinks he needs one more confirmation. They face a swarm of electric spiders. After the battle, they receive a lightning bolt, and Kakal calls him a lucky man. Alvin is confused, questioning if he was actually lucky with his drops. Seeing his look, Kakal worries she was being annoying, but Alvin quickly interrupts her. For the second time, Alvin excitedly asks Kakal to form a party with him. She points out that they are already in one, which he concedes. He bows and formally asks her again. With earnest intensity, Alvin asks her to stay with him forever. Kakal is left blushing and speechless. Kakal reminds him they've only just met. Alvin declares their meeting was destiny and that he can't live without her. He then remembers the importance of actually getting to know someone first. Alvin decides to be honest, revealing that he too has a minor skill. She is shocked to see drop rate reduction special. Kakal is amazed he could continue as an adventurer with such a skill. Alvin admits he was just kicked out of another party. He explains he came to the dungeon for the same reason she did. He then excitedly explains that the drops were normal thanks to her skill. Kakal is stunned that her skill, which has only ever caused trouble, was helpful. Alvin confirms that there was no kill bonus. He explains that other post-kill skills did not activate either. Kakal realizes the implication: if post-kill skills didn't activate, then Alvin's own minor skill didn't either. He confirms this with excitement, exclaiming that as long as he parties with her, he can be a normal swordsman. Kakal understands that he noticed her skill's potential because it was so advantageous for him. She asks if this is why he wanted to stay with her forever, and he confirms he wants her in his party even after the dungeon. She is left flustered once more. Kakal smiles, glad to hear that even a skill like hers has its uses. Alvin falls silent, considering her words. Alvin acknowledges her hesitation, admitting he has also caused trouble for parties because of his skill. He suggests she doesn't need to give an answer now, but asks if she will at least stay in a party with him for this dungeon. After a moment, Kakal agrees. The two adventurers shake hands, hoping they will get along well on their new journey together. Alvin marvels at his storage, which is now completely filled with item drops. He enthusiastically asks Kakal to help him gather them all. He attributes this incredible fortune to her skills as a priestess, and Kakal happily agrees to help. Alvin reflects on what a rare and valuable comrade Kakal is, even though their meeting was by chance. However, he notices she seems listless and tired. He suggests they take a break here. Kakal insists she's perfectly fine. Alvin gets her attention to press the matter. He reminds her that they are in a party, even if it's temporary, and that she should feel comfortable telling him if she has any concerns. The word concerns seems to trouble her. Changing the subject, Kakal expresses her admiration for how Alvin defeats every monster in a single blow, guessing he must be using a unique sword. Alvin clarifies that his blade is just an ordinary one, appropriate for his level. Alvin explains that by targeting weaknesses and with the strength boost buff from Kakal, he can take down even medium-layer monsters in one hit. Kakal finds it strange that he did this for every single monster, but Alvin decides to take it as a compliment. He admits he's done a lot of research to avoid being a burden, but it hasn't stopped him from being kicked out of parties anyway. Kakal is flustered as Alvin confesses that he simply wants to show off for her. He considers her a precious comrade and feels he needs to prove he isn't a weak vanguard so she won't give up on him. His earnest words leave Kakal completely speechless. As they continue, a glimmer of light catches Kakal's eye. They discover a treasure chest, and wary of mimics, Kakal asks if it's safe while Alvin volunteers to open it. Alvin tells Kakal to stand back, adding that he'll count on her healing if it turns out to be a trap. He remarks how reassuring it is to have a healer for backup. He opens the chest to find a scroll inside. Alvin unrolls the scroll and reads its contents, which seem to reinforce the rumors about the boss drop. He recalls that their goal was the skill-erasing item, something he hadn't been worried about since his own minor skill was negated by Kakal's. Kakal interrupts his thoughts. With a gentle smile, she tells Alvin that if only one of them can use the boss drop item, he should be the one to take it for himself. Alvin is taken aback by Kakal's sudden suggestion. She explains that she's been thinking about it. Since the item has such a rare effect, she figured this might happen and wanted to repay him for his help. Alvin realizes this is what she was worrying about earlier when she seemed so glum. After a moment of thought, Alvin suggests that if only one of them can use the item, they should sell it instead. Kakal is stunned by his proposal and asks for his reasoning. Alvin explains that what he truly wants is a comrade to adventure with. He reassures her that his level is high enough, and as long as she is with him, he can overcome his minor skill. Touched, Kakal thanks him and asks if he is being sincere. However, she hesitates before continuing. Kakal voices her concern, explaining that if she continues to take his experience points without him receiving any tangible reward, his dissatisfaction will inevitably grow. She sadly acknowledges that this has always been the pattern for her. Alvin recalls a past conversation where he was told that minor skills are a matter of emotions. He didn't understand it then, but now he does. These skills feed on negative feelings like jealousy and suspicion, consuming both the user and their comrades. He realizes that his former party members probably wore the same expression Kakal has now. Addressing her directly, he says he wants to speak to her as an adventurer who understands her circumstances. Kneeling before her, Alvin makes a solemn vow that he will never, ever betray her. After his intense declaration, Alvin immediately panics, worrying that he overshared. He quickly tries to change the subject, suggesting they worry about the item only after they've acquired it. Kakal, moved by his sincerity, simply agrees. Kakal apologizes for her earlier strange comment, but Alvin quickly dismisses it. He suggests they continue moving forward, and she readily agrees. As they walk, Kakal reflects on Alvin's character, seeing him as a truly upright person. She recalls how he suddenly appeared before her in the dungeon. He was a skilled and virtuous adventurer. She remembers accidentally telling him about her minor skill and feels that he might be the one to help her. This encounter feels like fate. However, a seed of doubt remains. It all seems too good to be true. Kakal knows that her minor skill means there's no guarantee Alvin won't change his mind like all the others. But his promise to never betray her echoes powerfully in her mind. The memory of his words shatters her fears. With her resolve strengthened, Kakal feels sure of her path forward with Alvin. Suddenly, a loud noise catches their attention, and Kakal alerts Alvin that it sounds like a battle. Alvin agrees that the sound is unusual. He tells her to follow him and immediately sprints toward the commotion. They arrive to find a massive horde of stone golems cornering another party of adventurers. One of the adventurers prepares to charge in, as his comrade tells him to wait for a buff. The adventurer rushes forward and strikes a golem, but his blade clangs ineffectively against its hard exterior. The adventurer recoils, admitting the golem is as tough as expected. Just then, another party member apologizes for being slow and successfully draws the monster's attention, telling Kakal to buff him. Kakal identifies the creatures as emerald golems, which are highly resistant to physical attacks, making them a poor match for swords. She admires their quick and accurate decision-making while struggling to keep up with her own chanting. Realizing a simple strength boost will be ineffective against so many golems, she decides on a different strategy. She considers Alvin's skills and prepares a more promising buff to maximize their damage. With newfound resolve, Kakal decides she genuinely wants to support Alvin's strength with all her might, not just as a duty to a comrade. Alvin is shocked as Kakal casts an advanced buff on him, physical resistance penetration. Amazed at receiving such an advanced buff for the first time, Alvin leaps into action, confident that he can now strike the golem's vulnerable weak point. His empowered attack connects, and the once invincible emerald golem shatters into countless pieces. Alvin is thrilled, realizing the buff allows him to completely ignore the golem's resistance, which will save them a lot of time. He tells Kakal he's depending on her. She thanks him, praising his magnificent skill in targeting the weak point. Amidst the wreckage of his own making, Alvin mutters a casual apology for the destruction. A distant shout comes from one of the adventurers they just saved, yelling for them to stand firm while his group handles a few golems. A remaining golem turns towards the noise. Alvin looks up, alerted by the call. Unable to hear clearly over the chaos, Alvin shouts back. He continues his relentless assault, striking down another golem. He confirms that as long as they are alive, he will press on. With a determined grin, he charges forward to finish the job. Alvin faces the last of the towering stone giants. He leaps into the air, preparing a devastating strike. His empowered blade slices through the golem's tough exterior. Kakal watches on, maintaining the powerful buff. With the last golem defeated, Kakal praises Alvin for his hard work. Alvin, amazed by the buff's incredible effect, asks if she's alright after using so much MP. He muses that such power must be because she's level 80, which seems to fluster Kakal. Kakal giggles, delighted by the compliment. Alvin observes her good mood, figuring there's no need to worry. He then turns his attention to the adventurers they rescued, expressing his relief. The young sorceress they saved approaches them. She begins by offering an apology, leaving Alvin and Kakal confused. At a safe point on the 24th floor, the sorceress explains that the golems got stuck in a narrow passage not shown on the map, trapping her. She reveals her plan was to farm the emerald golems for their valuable drops. She dismisses it as a mere side gig when Alvin worries they interfered. Alvin asks if her main goal is to defeat the dungeon boss. The sorceress explains that as a solo magic user, taking on the boss is impossible without a party. Alvin concedes her point. However, she hints that there is more to her story. With a sudden intensity, she declares her true purpose is to obtain the boss drop to erase her minor skill. The revelation stuns both Alvin and Kakal. Kakal observes Alvin and the sorceress Melina, noting they've formed a temporary party. Alvin explains they met on the 17th floor and he proposed they team up, which Kakal teases him about. Sensing his hesitation to ask, Melina correctly guesses that Alvin is curious about her negative skill. Melina reveals the name of her negative skill, Blessing of the Jealous God, explaining it is the reason she must adventure solo. Intrigued, Alvin asks about its effects. Melina begins to explain that it only activates when she is in a party. Melina explains the skill's first effect, a 10% stat boost for the entire party. However, she quickly moves to the downside. For every monster killed, the killer's stats are reduced by 3%, and this debuff stacks. Alvin is horrified by the potential for a massive stat decrease, but Melina tells him his calculation is not quite right. Melina clarifies that the stat decrease is calculated from the current value, meaning the initial buff is nullified after 3 kills. However, since the effect is a debuff, it wears off over time, preventing the penalties from stacking indefinitely. Alvin calculates that the skill isn't as terrible as it first sounded, but Melina gravely informs him that he's wrong, revealing there's a third, far more destructive effect that truly ruins parties. Melina reveals the devastating third effect. The skill steals the kill bonus from whoever lands the final blow and redistributes it among the other party members. This means the most active combatants are punished with a stat debuff and receive no experience for their efforts. Melina poses a hypothetical question to Alvin about the consequences of her skill. He correctly deduces that a combatant would try to avoid landing the final blow. Melina confirms this is precisely the problem, as fighters start avoiding their duty, leading to dangerous situations. Melina explains that in dungeons, taking damage only reduces HP without affecting performance. However, this rule has a hard limit. Once a person's HP hits 0, death is absolute and irreversible in the dungeon. Melina recalls witnessing parties fall apart as members argue over who should risk taking the final blow on a weakened monster. This infighting creates chaos and leaves them vulnerable. She has seen this lead to disaster when a cornered monster unleashes a final, desperate attack. Ultimately, her parties either turn on her or she leaves to prevent conflict. Alvin understands why she solos, and Melina confesses she couldn't bear the guilt if her skill caused someone's death. But soloing is dangerous, which is why she came to this cavern, drawn by rumors of the skill-erasing item. Alvin processes the information, agreeing that Melina's skill is a party killer, yet something feels off to him. A realization dawns as he considers their own party composition. Since he doesn't need kill bonuses, Melina's skill wouldn't affect him negatively. Kakal suddenly interjects, explaining she earns money by farming golems and plan to hire mercenaries for the boss fight. As Melina resigns herself to soloing, Alvin suddenly calls out her name. Kakal grabs Melina, enthusiastically asking her to join their party. A shocked Melina asks if she was even listening, but Kakal insists she was, pointing out that if the party's swordsman hesitates to kill, a rearguard member like Melina would be in grave danger. Kakal suggests they give it a try for now. An overwhelmed Melina finally agrees. The newly formed party then ventures deeper into the 24th floor of the cavern. As they prepare for their first battle, Alvin, already feeling the 10% stat boost, says they'll test things out on some monsters. Melina questions if their goal is to level up Kakal. Kakal clarifies that leveling isn't her concern. Kakal's instruction is simple, she wants Melina to get the kill bonus. Just then, a monster appears. Alvin identifies it as a tentacle plant. Melina immediately springs into action, declaring she'll finish it quickly. Alvin is stunned by the incredible speed of her incantation. With swift and practiced motions, Melina unleashes a devastating spell. A massive blast of energy erupts, completely obliterating the monster. Alvin is amazed that she destroyed it in a single hit. Melina explains that at level 38, it's simple as long as she exploits the monster's elemental weakness. Kakal asks which elements Melina uses. Melina casually replies that she uses 5, having already mastered all the available spells for her level. Kakal is utterly flabbergasted by Melina's ability to use 5 elements. She explains that mastering so many spells with unique chants is an incredible feat. Alvin recalls that even the experienced party leader they met before only specialized in 3. Karkal realizes the implication. Melina must have a prodigious memory to have memorized so many incantations. Melina explains that her fear of her negative skill causing an accident drove her to desperately memorize every possible spell to be prepared for any situation. Melina states that for a solo player, versatility is key. Her dedication earns Karkal's respect, while Alvin admits he struggles just to remember his cleric spells. He recognizes the immense effort Melina has put in to survive alone. Suddenly, Karkal remembers to check the party's status. Karkal pulls up the status screen to examine the debuff from Melina's skill. She spots an unfamiliar melting heart icon. Melina confirms that's the jealous god's curse, which she now has because she got the kill. Karkal confirms the 3% stat reduction on Melina's status. Melina, however, is confused, realizing she never actually received the debuff from the earlier kill. Seeing her confusion, Karkal suggests they move on and fight another monster to test it again. Another monster appears, an emerald golem. Alvin notes that this one isn't trapped and is too dangerous for the mages to handle alone. He steps forward, declaring that he'll take it on. Alvin charges the golem, but before he can strike, a blast of magic slams into the creature. He realizes he's receiving magical cover fire. The magical attack was so powerful it staggered the golem. Seeing his opening, Alvin prepares to unleash his own skill, Thrasher. Alvin executes his attack, a powerful slash that cuts the staggered golem down, shattering it into pieces. Alvin is surprised by how much damage he dealt, realizing the golem was already heavily damaged by the magic attack. Melina compliments his strength, guessing he must be a high level. Alvin deflects, saying he's not as high level as Karkal. He then asks Karkal to check the status screen again. Karkal reports that she didn't get it, leaving Melina confused. Karkal suddenly grabs Melina and once again begs her to join their party. Melina, flustered, points out that she already has, leaving Karkal to stammer that she meant something else. Karkal takes Melina's hands, looking at her intensely and asking her to be with them forever. Melina is left speechless and confused by the sudden, heartfelt proposal. Melina, blushing, finds the proposal embarrassing. Karkal panics, realizing she came on too strong just like Alvin did. She quickly clarifies her real intention. She wants Melina to join their party permanently, even after they leave the cavern. A flustered Melina reminds them that she already explained why she can't join a permanent party. Karkal turns to Alvin for support, and he gives his approval. Karkal then makes a surprising confession. She and Alvin have negative skills too. Alvin explains that Karkal's skill, Severed Head of the Usurper, has an unbelievable effect that accounts for her unusually high level. Karkal adds that Alvin's own negative skill forced him to work much harder, explaining his level. Melina finally understands they all share the burden of a negative skill. While she appreciates the gesture, she states that if it's just sympathy, she must decline. Karkal insists it isn't sympathy and urges Melina to check her stats again. Melina is shocked to find she doesn't have the jealous god's curse and actually received the kill bonus. Looking at the party status, Melina is stunned to see Karkal has 2 stacks of the curse. Karkal reminds Melina of her own skill's effect. Melina recalls that Karkal's skill steals the credit for every kill. Karkal explains that since Melina's skill applies the debuff to whoever gets credit for the kill, she is the one who always receives the curse. Karkal explains the perfect synergy of their skills. Her skill steals the kill credit and EXP, but Melina's skill then takes that stolen EXP and gives it back to the original killers, while applying the stat debuff to Karkal. Melina realizes this means Karkal will never gain EXP, but Karkal happily declares that she doesn't mind. Melina turns to Alvin, pointing out that he won't get the full benefit either. Alvin reassures her that he prefers it, believing that kills are a team effort. As he speaks, Melina realizes they've overlooked a critical detail. Melina points out the flaw. Karkal will be taking on every single stack of the curse by herself, which will rapidly diminish her stats. Karkal calmly responds that she can simply use her Cleanse spell to remove the debuffs when they become too much to handle. Melina argues that Cleanse also removes buffs and has a long casting time, making it impractical in combat. Karkal smiles, reassuring her that at level 80, she can function perfectly as a healer even with her stats halved. This leaves Melina wondering why Karkal would make such a sacrifice. Karkal confesses she hates stealing the results of other people's hard work. She felt immense guilt being the only one to level up, unable to return the experience points she had taken. With a radiant smile, Cockle declares that a simple debuff is nothing compared to the guilt she felt, confident she can manage the negative effects. Melina is left stunned by her sincerity. Alvin formally extends the invitation again, suggesting Melina stay with them for a while. He points out it's much safer than going alone while they search for the boss and earn money. After a moment of thought, Melina quietly agrees. Melina accepts, stating that while it may only be for a short time, she looks forward to working with them. Cockle is overjoyed by her decision. Alvin welcomes her to the team as they shake hands. Alvin warns his party that one of the smaller monsters has slipped past him during the fight. Cockle confidently responds, stating that she will handle it. Cockle casts a spell, quickly dispatching the stray creature. With the immediate threats dealt with, Alvin breathes a sigh of relief and praises her for her excellent work. The spoils of their victory litter the ground. Alvin notices that they received a different kind of drop this time. Melina identifies it as a rare merman's tear, and Cockle comments on Alvin's luck. He examines the rare gem he found. Alvin offers the valuable item to Melina, but she is flustered and refuses to accept it. Alvin recalls how they had interfered with Melina's hunt for emerald golems. A flashback shows Melina's frustration, having just gathered all the golems herself when they appeared. Alvin insists that she should take the gem, telling her it's okay. Melina explains that accepting it would imply his help was a nuisance, and she worries this might cause him to hesitate to help others in the future. Melina finishes by saying she wouldn't want him to fall behind because of such a concern, reaffirming that he did a good thing. Alvin is struck by her logical and considerate nature. After thinking for a moment, he agrees with her decision. Flustered, Melina asks if Alvin thought she was being overly rational, which he quickly tries to deny. Cockle notices Melina's embarrassment and giggles to herself. Embarrassed, Melina hastily tries to change the subject. The party remarks on the surprising depth of the dungeon and the lack of maps for its lower floors. Melina admits that she is getting worried about how far the dungeon continues. Alvin suggests they take a break on an upper floor since they don't know when the next safe point will be. Melina checks on Cockle, asking if she is tired. She voices her concern that Cockle might be pushing herself because her stats are declining. Cockle insists she is fine, though Alvin quietly remarks to Melina that she's just being strong-willed. Melina expresses her sheer delight at not receiving any X bonuses, a sentiment Cockle finds completely bizarre. Turning to Alvin, Melina asks if being their sole vanguard is a burden, but he reassures them that with their support, his job is easy. Alvin adds that since his minor skill is nullified, he can finally gain X bonuses and feels he should be the one apologizing for reaping all the benefits. Melina insists there's nothing to apologize for, and Cockle agrees, saying he's serving as an excellent wall for them. Alvin is visibly touched by their words. Glad for their reassurance, Alvin looks up. He notices some text inscribed on the wall, and Cockle asks him to read it since he is taller. Alvin reads the inscription, which sounds similar to the text at the dungeon's entrance, while Cockle diligently takes notes. Melina speculates that it might be a hint about the boss drop. Cockle seems to confirm Melina's suspicion. Cockle explains that dungeons appear irregularly and vanish once the boss is defeated, meaning they have only one chance to acquire its unique drop. Realizing the importance of this, Cockle decides she must confirm something with Alvin. She asks if he plans to defeat the boss, and he confirms his intention to press onward. Cockle then poses a critical question about what Alvin plans to do with the boss drop. Melina quickly grasps the underlying issue. She asks if Cockle is wondering who should use it, just as Alvin begins to explain the item's potential properties. Cockle theorizes about the item, considering that it might not be unique or single-use. She dismisses the idea of it being limitless, as that would mean no one in the world would have minor skills. Based on her experience that a boss's main drop is rarely a consumable, she concludes they are back to the question of how many uses it has. Alvin cuts through her frantic speculation with a simple declaration: they will worry about all that after they have actually acquired the item. His straightforwardness leaves Cockle utterly stunned. Still reeling, Cockle questions how Alvin and Melina can be so in sync when they have just met, wondering aloud if she is being deceived. Alvin calmly acknowledges her concern is understandable and asks her to listen to their explanation for now. After a moment of hesitation, Cockle agrees to listen. Alvin explains that their circumstances are constantly changing and they might gain new information as the raid continues. He adds that they could even be beaten to the punch by someone else. He concludes that the first thing they must do is secure the boss drop. Karkal reflects that Alvin has a point and that both he and Melina possess strong adventure skills beyond just their stats. Alvin gives credit to his teammates, saying the golem's defeat was only possible with their support. Karkal observes that they are not the type of people to prioritize their own circumstances or make unreasonable demands. Karkal thinks that if she remains with these two, she may reach a conclusion she can accept, while Melina asks what kind of face she is making. Melina agrees with the plan, thinking it is best to worry about the item after they have acquired it. Karkal smiles, convinced that pressing on is the shortest path to their destination. Alvin promises to do his best to make it happen, and Karkal enthusiastically agrees. Karkal thinks to herself that she wants to go on adventures with comrades like these, which Melina finds weird, causing Karkal to become flustered. Alvin suggests they start by finding the safe point on the floor, and Melina agrees. Suddenly a horrifying scream rings out, startling both Melina and Karkal. Melina wonders about the scream, while Alvin notes he cannot determine its origin from the echoes. Alvin realizes the danger is behind them and yells for everyone to run. A lone adventurer is seen sprinting towards them, causing Karkal and Melina to react with shock. The adventurer is being pursued by a swarm of monsters, prompting Alvin to order an interception while Karkal and Melina offer their aid. Melina announces she will handle the situation with a massive spell, causing Alvin to worry about the adventurer in front of them. She reassures him it will be fine, explaining she will tell the adventurer to dodge just as she activates her spell. Alvin confirms he'll signal the fleeing adventurer, while Karkal agrees to buff him with lightning magic. Melina expresses her gratitude to both Alvin and Karkal. With the plan set, Alvin prepares to spring into action. Melina shouts a warning to the fleeing adventurer, telling him to dodge to the side on her signal. The man is confused by the instruction. Alvin points out a cavity in the wall. The adventurer spots the hole as a potential escape route. The adventurer's companions, watching from afar, are confused by Melina and Karkal's presence behind their friend. He panics, realizing they are about to unleash a powerful area of effect spell. Seeing the man dart towards the escape route, Alvin tells Melina it is time to act. Just as the adventurer dives for cover, Melina unleashes a devastating spell, wiping out the entire horde of monsters in a single, massive blast. The force of the blast sends the adventurer tumbling. He complains to his sister, Melina, about her rough methods. The area is left smoking, the monster horde completely annihilated. Alvin is impressed by Melina's incredible might and her sharp eye in spotting the escape cavity. Melina casually mentions her interest in unusual geographical features. Alvin then checks in with Karkal about the status of her debuffs, and she confirms that the effects have been cleared as expected. Spotting the few remaining monsters, Alvin asks if they should deal with them. Melina agrees, leaving the decision on how to proceed up to the team. The party advances on the stragglers. The party engages the last of the monsters. Alvin notices the adventurers return with a slight surprise. The adventurer they saved emerges from the cavity. The adventurer, Melina's brother, eagerly offers to help. Alvin advises him to rest and not overdo it. But the young man suddenly dashes off into the fray, leaving Alvin bewildered and wondering where he disappeared to. With the monsters defeated, the adventurer they saved, Teto, flips through the air, landing deftly. He cheerfully announces that he is fine and still at full health, much to the party's surprise. Alvin, watching the now clear path, is taken aback by how quickly the remaining threat was neutralized, wondering if the fight is already over. Now resting at a safe point on layer 32 of the setting sun cave, Teto apologizes for carelessly attracting a massive herd of monsters. He gratefully tells Alvin's party that they saved him and praises their power. Alvin reassures him, explaining that it is common for adventurers to help each other when in trouble. The young man introduces himself as Teto, a thief, but quickly clarifies that his job doesn't make him a menace. Alvin calmly replies that a job title is just a classification and doesn't reflect one's character. Teto beams, happy to hear such a sentiment. Alvin introduces his own companions, Karkal, a priestess, and Melina, a sorceress. He explains that they met in the cave and formed a temporary party. Hearing the word temporary, Melina has a subtle, thoughtful reaction. Alvin asks if someone of Teto's high caliber is exploring alone. Melina teases him for screaming earlier despite his bravado, and Teto admits the horde was too much for him. Karkal correctly deduces that a solo thief in a deep layer would be scavenging for treasure chests, which Teto confirms, noting the area's lack of popularity makes it a good spot. Karkal elaborates that thieves who avoid battle are well suited for solo treasure hunting due to their speed and dexterity. Teto agrees that it's normal to find him treasure hunting here, given his high level, but then hesitates, admitting that something is holding him back. He trails off before explaining what. Sensing the issue, Alvin reveals his suspicion. He thought Teto might also possess a minor skill. Teto immediately understands, realizing they came to this dungeon because of rumors about a boss drop that can clear skills. He asks in disbelief if they're serious. Teto bursts into laughter, finding the idea of such an item strange. Melina, annoyed, interrupts him, questioning what he's talking about. She firmly states that skills are innate and bound to a person for life, making them impossible to get rid of. Teto confidently asserts that an item capable of bending the world's rules couldn't possibly exist. Despite his dismissal of the rumor, Melina looks at him intently, asking if he still plans on challenging the boss. Teto expresses his firm disbelief that an item capable of bending the world's rules could possibly exist. Despite his skepticism, Melina asks if he still intends to pursue it. Alvin, resolute, confirms that they will. Melina counters Tito's doubt, explaining that her extensive research confirms that an item to erase skills definitely exists. Teto admits he is just a thief and not an expert on items. He remains unconvinced, finding it impossible that something could tamper with and permanently lock a person's stats. Melina admonishes Teto for his narrow viewpoint, reminding him that the world is full of skills he has never heard of. Teto concedes that it's hard to prove a negative, but he still believes their quest is a fool's errand. Alvin acknowledges the possibility that the item might not exist, but states they've come too far to turn back. Teto questions his resolve. Alvin thanks him for the warning, but affirms they are still going for it. Teto reveals a startling fact: the boss room is on the 40th layer. Alvin is stunned to learn the boss is much deeper than he anticipated. Teto explains that while their levels are sufficient for the 40th layer, their party of 3 is too small. Teto points out that with only 3 people, defeating the boss will be difficult regardless of their skills. Melina sees through his words, calling him an open book. She teasingly asks if he wants to join their party, which he denies, claiming it would be too dangerous. Alvin tells Teto they are not ready to pull back yet. He proposes they first confirm if the 40th floor exists and gather information on the boss. Seeing their determination, Teto sighs and reluctantly agrees to their plan. Teto surprises the group by offering to lead them to the boss room. He explains that he's been there before, and Alvin questions why he is suddenly helping them. Teto resigns himself to their determination, figuring he might as well help since he can't stop them. Melina is ecstatic, eager to proceed with maximum efficiency. As they prepare to leave, Teto offers them some poison resistance potions. Teto hands a potion to Alvin, explaining its purpose is to ward off poison. Karkal mentions she could provide a poison resistance buff instead. Teto explains that since the monsters ahead are mostly poisonous, potions with a longer duration are more practical than a buff. He adds that using potions will also reduce the burden on the priestess, a point Melina concedes is true. Teto drinks a potion and tells the group to get moving. Alvin is thankful they can proceed without detours. However, he is worried about the boss being on the 40th layer, feeling he cannot endanger everyone. He thinks that if he is to be prudent, he should reconsider their formation. Suddenly, his empty potion bottle falls to the ground. Alvin stumbles and falls to his knees. Teto stands over him, gloating that Alvin has been tricked. Alvin realizes he has been drugged as a paralysis status effect appears. Teto laughs, calling them fools for swallowing something from someone they know nothing about. Alvin, paralyzed, insists that Teto drank the same potion. Teto holds up his own empty bottle. Teto explains that he drank a real potion, while the others took a paralysis liquid with a similar color. He taunts Alvin, confirming that he switched the bottles without anyone noticing. Alvin sees Melina and Karkal's empty bottles nearby, confirming they were also victims of the trick. Alvin realizes he got so caught up in Teto's intel that he failed to confirm the names of the items, leading them to this state. He concludes that it was entirely his fault. Teto mockingly tells him this is what happens when you underestimate adventuring. He grabs Alvin's hand, ready to begin looting. Teto tells Alvin he's just going to borrow his hand to open his storage. Items spill out from Alvin's now accessible inventory. After taking Alvin's things, Teto decides to loot the sorceress next. To Tito's surprise, Melina rises behind him, staff held high and ready to attack. Melina strikes Teto with immense force, sending him reeling. Teto is stunned, unable to comprehend what just happened. Melina coolly wonders aloud how she is able to move. She questions Teto, reminding him that he certainly saw her drink the contents of the bottle he provided. Melina confirms she drank the liquid, but explains that her high-level paralysis-resistance skill rendered it ineffective. Teto is stunned by this revelation, realizing her immunity is what allowed her to counterattack. Confused, Teto wonders why his own HP has dropped so significantly. Melina coolly informs him that it's because she is level 80, a fact that leaves him utterly shocked. She then challenges him, questioning if he truly wants to fight her given his low health and her superior strength. Realizing he is completely outmatched, Teto decides he has no choice but to surrender. He drops his weapon to the ground. He immediately surrenders, calling foul play. Melina retorts that he is the last person who should be making such a complaint. As Alvin recovers, he complains about the hellish experience. An irate Karkal declares her intention to physically tie Teto up and asks if anyone has a rope. Alvin volunteers to fetch one, thanking Karkal. With Teto now tied up, he complains about a bump on his forehead, while Melina rests her foot on his head. Melina, still furious, remarks that they should have just handed him over to the merman horde instead. Karkal points out that this can't be dismissed as a simple joke, speculating that Teto may have been planning a monster PK. This tactic involves luring monsters to kill other players. Teto frantically insists it was an accident, but Melina, her trust broken, states they will leave him in the hands of the guild. Alvin acknowledges that player killing is a serious taboo, and a vicious act if Teto's actions were intentional. Melina agrees with Karkal that it's too dangerous to leave him or bring him along. She suggests using a memory map to return to the dungeon entrance and asks Alvin if that's all right. However, Alvin hesitates and asks to postpone their return. The others are surprised by his suggestion. He explains his concern that there is a strong chance Teto might escape before they can successfully hand him over to the guild. Alvin elaborates, suspecting Teto has a skill that allows him to escape his bindings. He believes this is why Teto is acting so carefree, knowing he can get away at any time. He reflects on his master's teachings to always question things that seem off, a lesson he applied to their current situation. Alvin presents his evidence, questioning why Teto only stole essential items for long journeys. He lists the items taken: potions, food, and spare equipment. He then points out that one particular item was left completely untouched, catching the attention of a surprised Melina and Karkal. Alvin points out that Teto left behind a rare item, the merman's tear. Karkal realizes this means Teto's true intention was to prevent them from progressing any further in the dungeon. Frustrated, Teto yells at them to just go home since they've figured him out. The others are confused by his outburst. Teto explains that he felt it was his responsibility to stop them since they had saved his life. With a deranged look, Teto shouts that if they insist on proceeding, they should just go fight the boss and die, leaving the party stunned. Melina asks if he has information on the boss, but Teto defensively asks if they don't trust him. Alvin calmly intervenes, noting that Teto's actions have been questionable. He tells Teto to answer them, promising they might consider a temporary retreat if his information is valid. Teto finally reveals that there's a secret to the boss that has prevented anyone from defeating it. He asks the sisters if they have a map for the deeper levels of the Setting Sun Cave and questions why map merchants have none to sell. Teto emphasizes that this lack of available maps is abnormal. Karkal wonders if the lack of maps is because the cave is new or unpopular, but Teto corrects her. He reveals the chilling truth: not a single party that has raided the cave has ever returned. Alvin finds this impossible, arguing that any adventurer reaching the 40th floor would be cautious. Teto explains that poisonous monsters appear ahead, but if they can manage the poison, reaching the boss room is straightforward. Teto explains the mindset of these careful adventurers. Having not used many resources, they decide to take a quick look inside the boss room. Their plan would be to confirm the boss's attributes and attack patterns to prepare for a proper attempt later. With a grim smile, Teto reveals the trap. The moment they enter, the door seals behind them, and no adventurer has ever returned. The fact that the dungeon remains uncleared proves his point. Alvin understands now why no party has ever made it back. The group realizes the terrifying implication. Every party that entered the boss room was annihilated. Melina concludes that the door closing on its own is a clear sign that retreat is impossible, meaning what awaits them is either victory or death. After their battle, a peculiar item drops. It's a pair of stylish magical glasses that change design based on the wearer. Alvin decides to try them on first, despite Karkal and Melina's apprehension. As he puts them on, his hair unexpectedly poofs up into a cloud. Melina enthusiastically declares the glasses suit him perfectly, making him look more slender. Karkal adds that he now has a military chief vibe, though Alvin feels the look isn't for him. Alvin comments that as a swordsman, he has no need to boost his magic and passes the glasses to Karkal. When Karkal tries them on, they transform into a pair of round, bookish glasses, and she shyly asks for their opinion. Alvin remarks on her new bookworm aesthetic, which he believes has a certain appeal. Karkal, however, feels she wouldn't benefit much from the WIS boost and suggests Melina should be the one to equip them. She apologizes for having taken them first. When it's Melina's turn, the glasses shockingly morph into a pair of gaudy, happy birthday sunglasses. Stunned, she asks what's wrong as Alvin apologizes for the result. Looking at her reflection, Melina cries out in dismay, wondering why she is the only one who ended up looking so ridiculous. With Karkal questioning the item's very definition of stylish, the glasses are promptly stored away. While the party rests, Teto comments that forcing every adventurer to fight the boss without retreat sounds tough. Melina explains that she has taken on quite a few bosses found in deep layers. Alvin asks Melina if there was ever anything she couldn't decipher, noting her experience as a super high-level healer. Melina explains that it is normal for boss rooms with gimmicks to forbid retreat. Teto correctly deduces that this is to prevent adventurers from leaking information about the mechanisms. Melina elaborates that such special conditions are usually accompanied by clues or lore found elsewhere in the dungeon. Melina finds it hard to believe this particular room has a retreat prevention gimmick since it seems devoid of anything special. Karkal immediately suspects Teto is lying again. Teto retorts that if levels and manpower were all that mattered, a dungeon of this size would have been conquered long ago. Alvin asks if Teto is implying there's a secret involved. Teto confirms, suggesting a complex gimmick is at play, one that only this specific boss uses. The party reflects on the irrationality of a dungeon with no hints. Karkal notes Teto's extensive knowledge about the setting sun cave. She then demands to know why he is there in the first place. Melina theorizes that Teto was after treasure in the deeper levels. Karkal quickly dismisses this, explaining that since there are no maps or people who have returned from the deeper levels, Teto couldn't have known they existed. Karkal posits that Teto must have learned about the boss room by observing many other parties fail. Alvin realizes this means Teto never joined those parties, which seems strange. He then confronts Teto, asking why he was waiting outside the boss room. Teto is at a loss for words. Cornered, Teto deflects the question, telling them they should already know the answer. He tells them to ask Alvin, leaving the others confused. Alvin tells Teto he has a prediction. He asks Teto to confirm if it's correct. A flashback to Teto's past begins. Teto recalls a difficult childhood where he had to fight others over scarce resources. His perspective changed when he overheard a bard's tale. The story was about a group of adventurers who faced challenges as equals instead of fighting amongst themselves. He knew that with a lowly mindset, he would never acquire any comrades. Inspired by the story, Teto became an adventurer at age 10, determined to face challenges with everyone as equals. During a battle, all of his stats suddenly plummeted. He cried out that he couldn't move, begging his party to cast a spell to clear the effects. He was struck down by the monsters. He desperately pleaded for his comrades to save him. Lying helpless on the ground, he watched them abandon him. Realizing how naive he had been, the betrayed Teto vowed he would never form another party again. This painful memory led him to his current path. He resolved that as a lowly thief, he would find his own way. His plan was to snatch a party's drops after they defeated a boss. Alvin correctly concludes that this was Teto's initial intention. Karkal is furious at the revelation that Teto planned to snatch their drops. She realizes he was secretly waiting for an opportunity to steal from them. Teto nonchalantly admits that it is difficult for a solo thief to get boss drops. Melina declares that he must be handed over to the guild. Alvin observes that Teto's lack of preparation suggests that snatching loot isn't his usual method. He deduces that Teto resorted to it this time because he had no other options. Alvin then reveals the reason: Teto also possesses a minor skill. Teto concedes the point, noting that the no retreat rule of the boss room meant he had no chance to steal anything anyway. Alvin asks when Teto first noticed his abilities. He explains that he was intrigued by the variety of skills Teto used during their battle with the mermen. Alvin explains that he had a preconceived notion that possessing many skills was a sign of being a minor skill bearer. Karkol points out that Teto stayed despite knowing it was impossible to steal. Teto claims he enjoys hunting for treasure. Alvin presses him, confirming that Teto had witnessed many skilled adventurers fail against the boss. Teto grumbles that he tried to warn the other adventurers, but they were too dense to listen. Alvin recalls how they themselves were one of the many temporary parties of youngsters that kept appearing at the Setting Sun Cave, which is how they all met. Alvin muses that even if he can't get rid of his own minor skill, gaining comrades is a good thing. Karkol then asks Alvin what Teto's minor skill is, but he admits he doesn't know much about it either. Alvin reveals the name of Teto's skill: mummy theft. Teto confirms it with a sigh, calling it a truly annoying skill. Melina admits she has never heard of a skill with that name. Karkol can't imagine what its effect could be. Alvin asks what kind of skill it is. Teto explains that his skill causes him to take over any debuffs his party members receive. Alvin is shocked by the revelation that Teto takes over all debuffs. He realizes its potential to absorb all party debuffs. The mages immediately begin to analyze the skill's limits, questioning if it only affects debuffs and if he can differentiate between effects. Alvin is confused by their technical discussion. Melina and Karkol excitedly explain that buffs and debuffs are both treated as effects by spells like Clear. They note the ability to differentiate between them is incredibly rare, and Teto reluctantly agrees. Teto insists that no matter how rare it is, the skill is just a burden on him. Melina wonders why Teto considers it a burden rather than a merit. Teto explains that his skill is not as favorable as it sounds because if all party members receive the same debuff, the effect on him is amplified. Teto elaborates, showing that the rank of the debuff he receives increases with each party member affected, turning a low-rank debuff into a special one. He adds that receiving multiple types of debuffs at once is truly diabolical. He recalls what happened to him back then. Recalling the traumatic event, Teto explains that all of his stats were cut in half, and his party abandoned him for dead. He was nearly on the verge of death. Ever since that disastrous experience, he has specialized in working solo. Karkol, however, picks up on a detail and asks him to wait. Karkol finds it strange that his stats were cut by at least half, questioning the specifics. Teto gets defensive, but Karkol clarifies that she isn't doubting him, she just wants to understand the skill's mechanics clearly. Karkol explains that mummy theft causes debuffs to rank up, not multiply, so a single type of debuff shouldn't reduce his stats by more than half. Teto confirms this, but adds that certain combinations of debuffs can cause the effects to multiply. Teto explains that a specific combination of debuffs can reduce his endurance by just over half. Karkol notes that having all stats cut by half would be an extreme situation. Teto agrees it's a situation that usually never happens. However, he reveals that a secondary effect of mummy theft can sometimes make it possible, which piques Alvin's interest. Teto reveals that his minor skill's effects fluctuate under a certain condition. The skill description states the effects fluctuate depending on the entire party's reward acquisition rate. Melina questions the term reward acquisition rate. Teto speculates it's a hidden stat that he can't verify on his own. Alvin correctly deduces that the debuff gets stronger if party members have skills that improve rewards, like prosperity or increased drop rate. A diagram shows how these skills add to the debuff's power, increasing its effect on Teto each time. Teto recounts how his debuffs shot up when a temporary party member with reward-boosting skills joined him. He admits that he was caught off guard by the sudden increase in the debuff's effects. Hearing this, Alvin immediately asks if the effects can also decrease. Teto speculates that skills with opposite effects, such as misfortune or reduced drop rate, might weaken the debuffs. Karkol presses him on how much they could decrease, but Teto has no idea. He tries to brush it off, saying it doesn't matter since they aren't forming a party. Suddenly, Teto lashes out, declaring he wouldn't want to join a poor party like theirs anyway. The insult visibly crushes Alvin, and Melina tries to comfort him. Karkol demands that Teto give them a proper answer. Teto reluctantly offers a guess. If a party had skills like reduced drop rate and misfortune, a low-rank debuff might be completely nullified. The rest of the group is stunned into silence. Kakal suggests they should test the theory. Kakal enthusiastically invites Teto to join their party. Teto refuses, reminding her of his vow not to join parties. Unfazed, Kakal tells him to just tag along for a few fights, assuring him that he won't take a loss. She then adds that she only thinks he won't take a loss. Alvin offers a different incentive, tossing an item to Teto. Teto recognizes the shiny drop from the merman. Teto effortlessly uses a skill to break his bonds and catch the item. Kakal is surprised at how easily he used Escape Bind. Alvin asks if he'll tag along now. With the gift in hand, Teto happily agrees. As they walk through the 32nd floor of the Setting Sun Cave, Teto apologizes to Melina. She tells him not to worry about her hitting him, but seems flustered about something else, admitting she might have missed his most painful spot. Teto misunderstands, cheerfully assuring her that he can handle physical injuries. Alvin then teases Melina about her ridiculous strength, warning himself to be careful not to anger her. His comment earns him an indignant shout from Melina. As the full party walks together, Kakal questions Alvin's generosity for giving Teto the merman's tear. Melina quietly teases that Alvin might be trying to compensate for being cold poor. Alvin, seemingly distracted, asks why they've returned to the Setting Sun Cave. Melina reminds him their goal is to clear their minor skills. When Alvin asks what comes next, she passionately proposes they officially form a party to seek greater adventures. Alvin thoughtfully agrees that it's a good idea. Kakal expresses her doubts about Teto truly wanting to join a party, though Alvin remains optimistic. Alvin hopes that this will be a good opportunity for Teto. Teto, growing impatient, interrupts their private conversation to ask why they aren't proceeding deeper into the cave. Alvin explains that they are searching for monsters that can inflict debuffs in order to test Teto's mummy theft skill. Motivated by the gem he received, Teto eagerly dashes ahead, promising to guide them to the boss room. Teto's enthusiastic charge is cut short when he unexpectedly slips on a patch of ice. While the others are confused by his fall, Alvin senses danger and urgently shouts for everyone to wait. From the icy ground emerges a massive, monstrous beast, a frost chimera. The party panics at the sight of such a powerful monster, which Alvin notes must have been hiding. Melina and Kakal immediately suggest retreating. The word retreat triggers a painful memory for Teto as he lies frozen on the ground. Gripped by terror, Teto fears that he is about to be abandoned by his comrades once again. He vividly recalls the moment his former party fled, using him as a decoy to save themselves. It's a fate he desperately wants to avoid repeating. The memory of their betrayal floods his mind, the profound misery of being left behind by those he had considered his comrades. He cries out, lamenting that all he ever wanted was to have comrades. Overwhelmed by his traumatic memories and the present danger, Teto screams, convinced he is about to die. Melina's concerned voice cuts through his terror, calling out his name. He snaps back to reality, dazed and confused. She expresses her relief, explaining she was worried when he didn't get back on his feet. Teto then sees Alvin holding back the chimera, actively protecting him. In utter disbelief, Teto asks if they aren't going to run away. Alvin confidently declares that their combined strength is enough to handle the beast and announces their intention to continue the fight. Teto watches as both Kakal and Melina begin chanting their spells. His mind slowly accepts the incredible reality: no one is running away. The realization that he won't be abandoned fills Teto with a new resolve. He clenches his fist, determined to fight. His determination earns an encouraging "hell yeah" from Alvin. The battle begins as the chimera leaps back and lets out a powerful roar. It prepares a freezing breath attack, and Alvin shouts a warning that it will reach their rear guard. The others discuss the need to avoid a head-on confrontation with the powerful attack. Teto suddenly charges straight towards the monster, catching Alvin by surprise. Realizing Teto has a plan, Alvin tells him he'll provide cover. Melina quickly casts a freeze resistance buff on Teto. He thanks her before focusing intently on his target. His focus narrows on the chimera's snake tail, which begins to glow. Teto spots the perfect opening and lunges forward to strike. He times his attack just as the chimera opens its mouth to unleash its icy breath. He lands a precise and powerful blow on the snake's head, stunning the creature and successfully halting its breath attack. Alvin is stunned, realizing Teto just executed a perfectly aimed counterattack. Having created an opening, Teto immediately calls for Kakal to follow up with her lightning spell. Kakal answers the call, striking the chimera with a massive bolt of lightning, its sheer power impressing even Teto. To their surprise, the chimera withstands the powerful blast. Seeing it prepare to take flight, Alvin declares he'll finish it before it can escape. But before Alvin can act, Teto darts past him with astonishing speed, moving in for the kill himself. Teto leaps onto the wounded beast, confident that his next strike with his glowing knife will be the final one. His attack finds its mark, and the frost chimera dissolves into a cloud of particles. The rest of the party watches in stunned silence. Kakal remarks on Teto's surprising mid-range combat skills, while Melina seems more impressed by his cool, shiny knife. Teto, meanwhile, catches his breath. Teto pants, exhausted but flushed with pride, as Alvin approaches and compliments his impressive, badass performance. Teto reflects on his past, remembering how he'd always scorned other adventurers and the very idea of a party. He realizes his old way of thinking was wrong. He now understands that other parties must have had members with minor skills who were accepted by their comrades. He recalls the adventurers from the tales of his youth who shared every hardship and triumph together. He finally admits to himself that he was always envious of that kind of bond. He looks over at his new companions, who stand together not just as a group, but as a true party. Teto questions if he truly belongs with them, but ultimately decides that, for now, he will take a chance on this newfound camaraderie. Alvin playfully apologizes for taking his kill. Teto, too overwhelmed with emotion to respond properly, can only bow his head. Alvin confirms that the chimera's weak point was its snake tail, which he hadn't known. Teto admits that he only figured it out on the fly, as it was his first time ever fighting such a creature. Alvin asks if Teto has a skill for finding weak points, but Teto explains it's not a skill, but more like a honed intuition. Intrigued, Kakal presses for a more detailed explanation, hoping she might be able to learn the trick herself. Teto suggests that one could figure out a monster's weaknesses by thinking from the perspective of the world's creator. The concept of a creator puzzles the others. He elaborates on his theory that the world is like a miniature garden, designed by a higher being. In such a world there must be a balance. If powerful monsters exist, they cannot be invincible and must therefore have weaknesses. Teto concludes that the world is in balance. He believes the creator would place weaknesses in logical places, often revealing them just before or after a monster's major attack. Kakal finds his hypothesis surprisingly reasonable. Teto proudly calls his ability a special skill honed through battle. Alvin teases that it sounds more like wild intuition. Kakal expresses doubt that she could adopt this mindset, stating that if she were the creator, she would hide things where no one could ever find them. Alvin is suddenly reminded of Melina's minor skill, the God of Envy's curse. Melina rushes to check her status in a panic. Melina is shocked by what she sees on her status screen. She confirms that her curse is gone. The others realize that their theory was correct. The party celebrates this miracle, wondering if it was a coincidence or fate. Teto, unaware of what they're discussing, interrupts to remind them of their original plan to test his mummy theft skill. His suggestion is met with mischievous grins, as the others are now very intrigued to see how he handles a debuff. Teto gets a sinking feeling that he may have made a grave mistake. He watches with apprehension as they skip ahead cheerfully. As the group searches for a monster that can cast debuffs, Alvin grows frustrated with their lack of progress. Suddenly, Tet leaps down from a cliff, interrupting their search. He proudly presents a cool new knife he has acquired. Tet enthusiastically demonstrates that the knife leaves a trail of light when swung, a feature that Alvin finds incredibly cool. Melina, ever practical, questions its purpose, only for Tet to admit its only function is to look cool. Both Tet and Alvin declare it's the spirit of adventure, leaving Melina utterly confused. Alvin and Tet continue to bond over the knife's aesthetic, with Tet also boasting about its offensive capabilities. Tet claims that while he may lack a cleric's strength, his firepower is unmatched. Melina becomes suspicious and pointedly asks Tet if he obtained such a rare weapon by stealing another party's boss drops. Tet, offended by the accusation, reveals that he found the knife himself on the 50th floor of the ancient dragon god's palace. When Melina asks for his level, Tet seems ready to answer. He proudly declares that he is level 55 and possesses 9 skills. Melina is flabbergasted by Tet's high level. She immediately apologizes for doubting him. Tet brushes it off, explaining that he was so focused on treasure hunting that he reached his current level without even noticing. As they talk, a strange gurgling sound suddenly catches Alvin's attention. The sound leads them to an aqua salamander, which Alvin identifies as a monster that will cast a debuff if provoked. He explains that they need to provoke it without dealing too much damage, otherwise it won't use its ability. Tet eagerly volunteers for the task, deciding to use his throwing knives for a precise, non-lethal attack. Tet's attack successfully provokes the salamander, which begins to cast its debuff. Ready for the experiment, Alvin allows the creature's attack to hit him. Once affected, he readies his blade to retaliate. Alvin swiftly dispatches the monster. After the battle, Tet excitedly tells Alvin to check his stats. Alvin confirms he doesn't have a debuff icon, as expected. However, when Tet checks his own status, he is bewildered to find that he is also completely unaffected by any debuff. Tet is confused, wondering if Alvin somehow dodged the attack, but Alvin denies it. Tet realizes he also didn't suffer any of the debuff's effects. The entire party is perplexed when Alvin also discovers a massive, unexplained boost in his stats and experience points. A look of realization dawns on Melina's face as she notes that Kakoru is also free of her curse. With newfound certainty, she turns to Tet and for the second time formally asks him to join their party. Tet is baffled by the repeated invitation, as he thought he had already joined them. He playfully asks Melina if she's having memory problems. This causes her to become flustered and stammer that that's not what she meant. In her flustered state, Melina blurts out her true intention. She wants Tet to stay with their party forever, leaving him completely stunned. A blushing Tet tells her she can't just spring something like that on him. Mortified by her outburst, Melina realizes her mistake. She clarifies that she meant he should become a permanent member of their party, not just a temporary guide for this dungeon. Tet agrees to consider it, but only if they explain everything that's been happening, especially the strange boost to his stats. Melina agrees to start from the very beginning. She drops a bombshell: all three of them possess minus skills. Tet is completely shocked, having assumed only Melina had a minus skill. She explains that all three of them came to the dungeon solo, seeking the boss drop to cure themselves. Tet recalls Alvin previously calling them a temporary party, now understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. Tet voices his concern that a party composed entirely of minus skill users would be a disaster. Melina prompts Kakoru to explain her own skill. Kakoru then reveals the name of her minus skill, Severed Head of the Usurper. The skill Severed Head of the Usurper allows the user to steal all rewards from any kill made by a party member. Tet immediately understands that this is how Kakoru became so powerful. He remarks that such a skill must make her incredibly unpopular, and Kakoru wryly agrees. Tet then asks the obvious question: why would they party with someone who steals all their rewards? Melina explains that Kakoru needed her skill, Blessing of the Jealous God. This skill grants a stat boost to all party members, but the person who lands the killing blow receives a stat reduction and has their bonus experience redistributed. Tet begins to grasp the complicated synergy, realizing this is why his stats increased. Kakoru happily adds that because of Melina's skill, she no longer hogs all the kill bonuses. Melina points out that this means Kakoru is now the one who gets hit with the stacking debuff from her skill. The debuff, the Jealous God's Curse, causes a stacking 3% reduction to all stats. Tet notes that having constantly decreasing stats is a terrible drawback, which Melina confirms is normally the case. Kakoru explains that at her high level, the reduction is negligible, and she can remove the debuffs with Cleanse. Alvin comments on how quickly Tet is understanding the complex interactions. Tet points out that Kakoru currently has no debuffs, and she confirms she hasn't cleansed them. This leads Tet to question why she is unaffected. He has a sudden, startling realization: the curse should have been transferred to him. Tet wonders aloud if his skill has stopped working, or if the debuffs were somehow erased. Melina clarifies that it's because his skill is working that the debuffs are gone. She reminds him that his skill has an additional effect. Tet suddenly recalls the secondary effect of his skill. It modifies the power of debuffs based on the reward rate. To complete the picture, Melina prompts Alvin to explain his own minus skill. Alvin prepares to reveal his skill. Alvin reveals that his minus skill is only drop rate down arrow X. Tet is stunned by the simplicity and awfulness of the skill, bluntly calling it shabby and poor. Tet immediately apologizes for his bluntness. He explains that Alvin's skill lowered the reward rate so much that his own debuffs disappeared. Alvin confirms the effect is powerful enough to cancel multiple debuffs. Still, Tet feels that something about the situation isn't quite right. Tet points out the final inconsistency. Despite Alvin's skill, they've been getting items normally. Kakoru reminds him of a crucial part of her skill's description about negating skills that trigger on a kill. Tet realizes this means those skills have no effect. He concludes that Kakoru's severed head of the usurper must be cancelling out Alvin's drop rate down arrow X. Alvin fondly recalls how he and Kakoru first met and how he earnestly pleaded with her to form a party. The memory causes Kakoru to blush, which Melina immediately teases her about, forcing her to make an excuse. Their 4 minor skills form a perfect circle, cancelling out each other's negative effects. Melina explains that they not only negate the downsides but are left with a net positive, a stat boost and debuff neutralization. Alvin agrees they've come out on top, though he still ponders the exact sequence of events from their last battle. Alvin meticulously reconstructs the chain of events, outlining how each of their skills interacted at every stage to create a flawless, beneficial loop. Kakoru officially labels their perfect interaction synergy, and the group marvels at how well their skills work together. With the explanation complete, Alvin checks if Tet understands. Melina boasts that very few parties have their combination of high levels, solid composition, and skill mastery. Kakoru adds that with her ability to cleanse any leftover debuffs, they hardly need to worry. Tet quietly processes everything, voicing his concern that joining their party permanently means he will have to participate in boss battles. From nearby, Alvin confirms that this is correct. Alvin acknowledges Tet's hesitation, admitting that it's a difficult choice with no guarantee of success. However, he passionately argues that they have created a party with the best possible chance of defeating the boss. Filled with determination, Alvin passionately urges Tet to join them so they can face the boss and surpass their limits together. Moved by Alvin's heartfelt plea, Tet finally relents and agrees to join them. However, he has one condition. He voices his deepest fear. He needs to know they won't abandon him during the boss fight. Tet warns that if they abandon him, he will return as an undead monster to curse them. Alvin, completely unfazed, reasons that this would be bad for him since he needs Tet to avoid debuffs. Tet is unimpressed, rating his pep talk a 3 out of 10. Alvin then promises to personally carry Tet during any retreat. To prove his point, Alvin playfully hoists Tet over his shoulder, boasting about his maximum carry limit. Alvin simply insists it was a result of his sincerity. Melina and Kakoru watch the exchange with amusement. Alvin calls an end to the horseplay, urging everyone to help collect the monster drops before they vanish. As they gather the loot, Tet finds a scroll and wonders if it's also a drop, but Kakoru guesses it's probably just flavor text. The party briefly discusses the scroll's origin. Tet unrolls the scroll to read it. The scroll contains a cryptic message, a sequence of colors from red to purple followed by the line, "As the sun sets, darkness falls." Kakoru speculates that the colors might hint at the types of monsters on upcoming floors. Tet points out that the colors form a rainbow. This triggers a realization for Melina. The monsters they've encountered have all appeared in rainbow order based on their physical color. Melina feels the hint has come too late to be of much use, as only purple and black remain. Alvin theorizes that the dungeon's theme might be rainbow or color. Kakoru is disappointed the scroll isn't a direct clue for the boss fight. Tet wonders if there are more hidden texts to find. Alvin speculates that they may have already found other clues without realizing it. Deciding not to dwell on it, he suggests they wait for a flash of inspiration. He rallies the group to continue moving forward while keeping an eye out for more texts, a quick change of pace that Tet notes. The party arrives at the entrance to a floor teeming with poison-type monsters. Alvin reminds everyone to be careful, but Tet is confident in the potions he provided. The group proceeds into the poison-filled corridor. As they walk, Alvin quietly gets Tet's attention. He confesses that his minor skill has always been a massive burden. Tet bluntly agrees, admitting he's amazed Alvin managed to survive as an adventurer with such a terrible skill. Alvin admits he never thought he'd see the day his skill would be useful. Looking at Tet with genuine gratitude, Alvin sincerely tells him that he's truly glad they became friends. Tet beams with happiness, pleased to be considered useful even without his skill's unique synergy. He thanks Alvin and confidently offers his firepower for the boss fight, telling Alvin he no longer has to handle the vanguard role alone. As Tet speaks, Alvin glances back at the girls and leans in to say something else. Alvin whispers to Tet that after being the only guy in the party for so long, he's relieved to finally have another man around. The comment leaves Tet completely speechless. Seeing Tet's stunned silence, Melina and Kakeru shout the truth in unison: Tet is a girl. The revelation hits Alvin with the force of a physical blow, leaving him utterly shocked. Alvin desperately tries to justify his mistake, citing Tet's masculine name and mannerisms, before realizing he had no real reason to make such an assumption. Furious and embarrassed, Tet calls him a jerk and storms off. She declares that Alvin can be the vanguard by himself from now on. Melina and Kakeru sternly scold Alvin for his rude and potentially fatal misjudgment. He bows deeply in apology, begging for forgiveness. Tet tells Melina not to take it too seriously, as Alvin is just clueless, and Melina suggests a new formation. Their squabble is abruptly cut short by the appearance of a giant, menacing rooster-like creature which looms over Alvin. After the giant rooster is defeated, its body dissolves. Alvin wryly comments on the gaudy, last-minute addition to their fight. Kakeru, Melina and Tet, now in high spirits, prepare for what's next. With their party finally complete and their unique synergy understood, Alvin rallies the group, and they charge forward together. Alvin trusts in Kakeru's powerful elemental enhancement, knowing all he needs to do is land some solid hits. He lunges forward, striking the creature with a powerful blow. Melina watches with a look of surprise. Melina shouts a warning, predicting the monster's next ranged attack will be different, while Alvin is surprised they've already depleted 10% of its health so quickly. Realizing the ranged attack consists of 3 consecutive blasts, he leaps away to ensure it doesn't hit his allies in the back line. Tet observes that Melina seems to have a plan, likely hoping to finish the fight with her next attack, and Alvin agrees it will require a lot of firepower. He decides they must wait for the first blast to see if the attack pattern has truly changed before committing to a course of action. Alvin instructs Tet to keep an eye on Melina, declaring that he will intercept the ranged attack. Alvin reflects on their seamless teamwork, noting how they barely need to speak to understand each other, making them an easy party to fight with. As the monster unleashes its first attack, Kakeru perfectly times a darkness resistance large spell. Alvin successfully parries the first blast. Just as they anticipated, the second attack follows immediately. He parries the second and third attacks as well, but the final blow sends him crashing to the ground. He grits his teeth, admitting that fully parrying a monster on the lowest level is a difficult feat. Just as he's knocked off balance, a healing spell from Kakeru envelops him. He thanks her for being right on time. He quickly slides out of the way, shouting for Tet to come through. Tet leaps into the fray, taunting the monster for being stiff after its powerful move, and unleashes a flurry of strikes. Her assault shatters part of the monster's body, and Alvin wonders if she's using a dagger technique that grows stronger with each consecutive hit. The monster is staggered from Tet's attack. Melina announces that her spell is ready, thanking the others for their patience. She unleashes an overwhelming blast of magic that completely engulfs their foe. Alvin can only watch, awestruck by the display of power. The scene shifts to a memory of Alvin's past, where a mage named Karen is warned not to stand still within a monster's attack range. Alvin realizes Karen is intentionally risking getting hit in order to complete his spell. While another party member is struck down, Karen triumphantly yells for the monster to die. Alvin watches in horror as his former teammate seems to laugh maniacally, calling the situation a rare one. After the battle, a tense silence hangs in the air. Alvin confronts Karen, telling him he shouldn't have stood so close to the monster. Karen scoffs, retorting that a swordsman should know that moving while casting risks ruining the spell. Alvin insists that his actions were dangerous, especially for a mage. Karen argues that the risk was worth it for the rare item drop and condescendingly asks if Alvin understands the concept of drop rates. Alvin is left speechless, forced to concede that Karen's point is valid. Dejected, he sits apart from the others, deciding to suggest they tackle a shallower floor where they can secure kills more safely. He reflects on the burdens of being a party leader, constantly worrying about income and leveling. He considered leaving the party. However, he admits that figuring out how to level up efficiently under such restrictions was rewarding in its own way. Now with his new party, Alvin can finally swing his sword with all his strength, without any reservations. He looks at his companions and wonders if there's anything more fun in the world. Back in the present, Alvin congratulates Melina on her impressive light magic. She thanks him for buying her the time to complete the incantation, explaining that she needs to use it often or she'll forget it. Alvin then high-fives Tet, praising her impressive dagger work as she cheers about Melina's awesome beam. Alvin then turns to a fidgeting Kakoru. He tells her that her heals and buffs were the definition of perfection. She giggles as they share a high-five. He praises her for predicting his need for healing and starting the incantation beforehand, leaving Kakoru shyly asking if he really thinks so. Alvin explains that while combat roles get the spotlight, a reliable healer like her is the most essential part of the party. Overwhelmed by the praise, Kakoru becomes extremely flustered, and Melina tells Alvin he's pushing the limits of her bashfulness. Kakoru tries to deflect the compliment, insisting that Melina is far more amazing. Kakoru points out that Melina didn't fumble her incantations or get hit once. Alvin adds that she also noticed the change in the monster's ranged attacks on her first encounter. Melina brushes it off, claiming she's just observant and noticed the pattern of its magic circle changed. Melina insists Tet is better, since she was the one who staggered the monster the most. Tet explains that she has fought abyss demons before and offers to give them a special lesson on the proper timing to counter them effectively. Melina and Alvin agree that Tet's ability to consciously counter the monster is strange and goes beyond simple skill. Tet deflects the praise, saying that Alvin is actually more capable than her. Alvin is confused, asking what he did. Alvin tells her not to force herself to come up with a compliment, though he admits her silence hurts a lot. Tet insists that's not what she meant. Tet finally explains that Alvin is good at everything, so she can't pick just one thing. She lists his strengths in combat, his battlefield awareness, and his planning outside of battle. Melina agrees, summarizing that he is great at adventuring. Alvin is taken aback, admitting it's the first time anyone has ever said something like that to him. The others encourage him, saying he should have more self-confidence and that it's only his negative skill that stands out in a bad way. He reflects on his past, realizing that being forced to create action plans and pay close attention to his party's state are habits he developed through trial and error. He sees now that the tough days of being kicked out of parties weren't all in vain. The party reaches the safe point just before the boss room. Tet identifies it as the last area, and Alvin confirms that they didn't find any more useful texts along the way. Alvin decides they should eat and take a longer break. As they settle down, Tet complains that the field rations are boring and wishes for some roasted meat. Melina mentions she actually likes the rations, which contain nuts and dried fruit. Tet retorts that it's just squirrel food, which shocks Melina. The others then start listing their own cravings for fresh vegetables, fish, and potatoes. Kakoru's stomach rumbles as all the talk of food makes her even hungrier. Tet comments that he pictured people with holy jobs taking vows of poverty, but Kakoru is completely different. Kakoru sheepishly admits she was often scolded for sneaking candy in school. She explains that she attended a seminary in the East but had to drop out. Tet jokingly asks if she was kicked out for being a glutton. Kakoru clarifies that it was because her family's business declined and they could no longer afford the tuition. Kakoru adds that her family's business eventually recovered, and now she sends them money. She had dreamed of being an adventurer anyway. Melina then reveals that she also dropped out of a magic academy. She explains it was because it was too expensive. Melina explains that her family is low-level nobility. As the fourth-born daughter with no marriage proposals, her parents sent her to the academy to find a good partner. Tet teases her for being on a manhunt, which Melina calls rude. Tet became an adventurer in order to leave her home. She explains that she left an orphanage and became an adventurer simply because she wanted money. She adds that she's grateful to the orphanage and still sends them money and food, which Alvin finds virtuous. He then gently suggests that if she has reasons besides money, she can tell them. Tet hesitates, wondering if she can admit something as childish as wanting to be like the adventurers in stories. She turns the question around, asking Alvin why he became an adventurer. Alvin admits it's the first time he's ever really talked about this. Alvin explains that his family were unremarkable farmers, but he was always interested in adventurers. This was because a former swordsman adventurer lived nearby. He was also the strongest physically among his peers and had a great number of skills. As the second-born son, he wouldn't inherit the family fields, so it felt natural for him to become a swordsman. Tet finds his story to be quite run-of-the-mill, admitting he was hoping for more. Alvin sheepishly agrees that he is, in fact, run-of-the-mill. He then suggests they take a short break. The party settles down to rest. As they rest, Alvin begins to wonder. He muses that if they continued to adventure with this party, they wouldn't even need an item to erase their skills. He wonders what everyone would do if they could erase their skill. He imagines Kakeru lending her power to a major party, tackling high-difficulty quests. He also pictures Tet forming a party to efficiently collect treasure. He pictures Melina joining a group of exceptionally intelligent people to reach greater heights and contemplates the idea of continuing on without this specific party. As Alvin ponders, Kakeru has her own quiet thoughts, wondering if, after erasing her skill, it would even be possible to find a party better than this one. This chapter focuses on Kakeru's decision. A young boy named Alvin finishes his chore of carrying water. He announces his completion to an old man nearby. The old man praises Alvin's work and assigns him the task of cutting grass. Annoyed, Alvin insists he wants a sword, not a sickle. In response, the old man strikes him with a broom, chiding him for his cockiness. The man explains that wielding a sword requires full-body strength, which farm work helps to build. He then uses his own bad back as an excuse, telling Alvin to show some appreciation. Alvin, however, knows he is lying. Alvin recalls that he's seen the old man rise with the chickens every morning. He knows the man's true routine is to practice swinging his sword. This memory fuels young Alvin's dream to one day wield a sparkling sword, make many friends, and embark on all sorts of adventures. He finds her humming pleasant, even if the pitch is slightly off. In the present, while the party rests, Alvin notices Kakeru humming while her stats are open. Alvin's voice startles Kakeru. She becomes extremely flustered, apologizing and begging him to forget he heard her. She insists her humming isn't meant for others to hear. Kakeru worriedly asks if her pitch was off, and Alvin tries to downplay it. He realizes he has upset her and decides he needs to cheer her up. To lift her spirits, Alvin offers Kakeru a candy, telling her she can sing as much as she wants. He explains that it's a minty freebie from the canteen. Kakeru's mood instantly brightens as she accepts the treat. She prepares to eat it, much to Alvin's relief. Kakeru places the candy in her mouth. She savors the taste with a contented smile. Kakeru happily remarks that sucking on the candy is very soothing for her throat. Her comment makes Alvin blush. He stammers in agreement. Kakeru explains that the song is from her hometown and she was feeling nostalgic. She mentions that she usually just counts the beats internally. This makes Alvin realize she was using her stats screen to keep time. Alvin is amazed by her ability to keep track of time using a song's tempo. Kakeru explains that the song has 1 beat per second and she can maintain it for about 5 minutes. She adds that this skill is useful for tracking spell durations and maintaining rhythm during chants. Kakeru says that matching the beat to a song makes it easier and more fun. She considers it a simple topic, but Alvin disagrees. He believes her skill is more significant than she lets on. Alvin admits that as a non-magic user, he doesn't fully understand her methods. Kakeru tells him it's fine and that she has a long way to go herself. She reassures him to just focus on moving forward. Leaning close, Kakeru whispers a promise to keep Alvin's HP up, filling him with a sense of her reliability. Nearby, Melina, who had been feigning sleep, smirks. Melina reveals she was awake, startling Kakeru, and compliments her melodious chanting. She mentions that as a mage, she doesn't need the same level of precision as a healer, making Kakeru's meticulous practice an honor to witness. Alvin praises Melina as well, calling them both dependable. He comments that maintaining multiple buffs is difficult. He then questions if Kakeru's buffs last an unusually long time. His question surprises both Kakeru and Melina. Kakeru quickly insists her buffs have a normal duration for a cleric. Melina finds her secrecy strange. Tet notes that Kakeru seems to handle anything considered normal with ease. Alvin reminds them her high level is the reason she could defeat a goblin in one blow. Kakeru recalls feeling powerless as a cleric against a massive horde of monsters in the past. Looking at her companions, she gratefully states that she is still here because of them. Tet wakes up, asking if they are planning to put Kakeru in the vanguard. Alvin dismisses the idea, saying they were just getting ready to leave. Melina then tells Tet to tie his bootlaces. With their discussion concluded, the party prepares and moves onward through the cavern. Their path leads them to a massive, ornate set of double doors. As the party arrives at the doors, Tet remarks that they've finally made it and Kakeru speculates about its design. Alvin interrupts, asking to speak with everyone for a moment. Alvin points out that they've collected enough items for a significant reward. He suggests they've achieved their goals. Melina, however, reminds him of their primary objective, coming to the cavern to erase their negative skills. The group reflects on their individual pasts. They remember the circumstances that brought them together. Each member recalls their journey, from being ostracized to finding a place within this unique party. They all remember their shared desire to find friends and form a party for adventures. Alvin voices his concerns about the upcoming boss, highlighting the danger and the inability to retreat. They could search for more hints on the upper levels. They could return home to prepare further. Or they could sell their information and wait for the boss drop to become available on the market. Alvin presents these as their available options. He asks for everyone's opinion. He puts the choice before them: should they go home or should they challenge the boss? When Kakeru asks for his thoughts, Alvin pauses. He admits that he feels like he's dreaming, having never imagined he would make it this far. He explains that being in a party is better than he ever could have hoped for. It was the one thing he always wanted but never thought he could have. With newfound resolve, Alvin declares his decision: they should challenge the boss now. He explains that their combined negative skills create a unique positive effect. It's an advantage they would lose if even one of them were missing. The rest of the party listens to Alvin's reasoning, their expressions serious and contemplative. Melina agrees, eager to see the boss drop for herself and unwilling to let another party claim their victory. Tet is also ready, confident in the hints they've found after thoroughly searching the dungeon. Kakeru happily declares the matter settled, ready to press on. When Alvin checks if she is sure, she smiles. She states that she is only a healer because they need her. Alvin understands. He realizes that with this party, erasing their skills is no longer a necessity. They are all choosing to face the boss together because they share the same feeling. He is aware that this party might not last forever. Adventurers often part ways for reasons like injuries, quarrels, or being recruited by other groups. Thinking of his future survival as an adventurer, even if he ends up alone again. Alvin feels compelled to confirm the rumor about erasing negative skills for himself. Driven by this need for knowledge, Alvin declares his desire to find out if negative skills can be erased and pushes open the heavy doors. Alvin and the others stare in disbelief at the unexpected scenery. Kakeru voices the group's confusion, asking where the boss is, as all they see is a tree. Kakeru speculates that perhaps the boss has not yet made its appearance. Tet suddenly dashes ahead of the group to investigate something. He recoils in disgust at what he finds. Tet stares down at a grotesque, brain-like mass lying amongst the foliage. Looking up, the party sees that the massive tree is laden with similarly bizarre, colorful fruits resembling various internal organs. Melina approaches and asks Tet if he has located the boss. Kakeru feels a wave of nausea looking at the strange object. Alvin finds the sight unsettling, noting the different colors and shapes of what he presumes are the tree's fruit. Suddenly, the heavy doors behind them begin to slide shut, and Tet cries out a warning. Melina notes that they still have time to retreat. She contemplates leaving to reformulate their plan. Alvin firmly rejects the idea of retreating. Kakeru and Tet voice their agreement, feeling confident in their current level of preparation. The door slams shut with a final clang. The party stands resolute before the sealed entrance. Melina states there's no turning back, and Alvin declares they must now defeat the boss with their full strength. An ominous voice echoes through the room as a dark substance begins to bubble up from the ground. While Alvin braces for an attack, Tet believes it's a staged event since no boss name has appeared. The voice speaks of a battlefield devoid of the colors of violence and fear. Tet is left confused by the strange pronouncement. Melina shouts a warning to the others, having noticed something stirring within the tree's trunk. As the voice speaks of whales, a figure begins to emerge from the foliage. The face of a woman appears as the voice mentions the purple of despair. A beautiful, ethereal woman with long, flowing hair emerges completely from the tree, her body seemingly part of the wood and leaves. Alvin identifies the creature as a massive plant-type dryad, unlike any he has seen before. The dryad raises her arm in a graceful motion. Several of the strange fruits detach from the tree and float down as Tet wonders what she is planning. As the fruits land, the scenery dissolves into a chaotic and brutal vision of a massive war, with soldiers clashing on a blood-soaked battlefield. Melina stares in shock, wondering if they are seeing a painting of a war. Kakoru connects the vision to ancient scriptures detailing a great war. Alvin is horrified by the large-scale slaughter, likening it to hell. Tet is terrified, thinking the scene is staged to scare them, to which Melina wryly agrees it's very effective. The Dryad's voice echoes, lamenting that without the rainbow of the battlefield, her fruit has withered and dulled. She speaks of her body becoming a hollow darkness as she ages. She declares that despite her decline, she must continue to paint the scenes of that appalling war. Her voice trails off ominously. The party readies their weapons, anticipating the start of the real fight. With a sinister smirk, the Dryad reveals her true intent, declaring that she needs colors. A wave of dark energy erupts from her, engulfing the party. Alvin realizes they are not taking any damage and wonders if this is also part of a staged scene. The party is unsure of the darkness's effects, questioning if it is even safe to breathe. Tet concludes that it must be a gimmick and that some rule of the battle has changed. Alvin gasps as he feels a strange effect take hold. Tet questions if it is a debuff, but Melina knows it is not. Kakoru realizes with concern that if it's not a debuff, her cleanse spell won't work. A look of horror dawns on Alvin's face as he realizes the dire implications of this unknown effect. A system message appears before them, confirming their fears. All skills are now unavailable. The party understands the gimmick. They are in a room with a special rule that restricts skill usage. Melina is stunned, having never encountered such a rule before. Kakoru mentions having experienced a similar situation where magic was unavailable. Melina asks if that was difficult, but Kakoru explains they had clues beforehand and were able to prepare with items. The Dryad taunts them as foolish children of man who do not shun conflict. Tet cries out in frustration at the unfairness of the situation. Alvin quickly takes command, telling the party to switch gears and adapt to the new circumstances. Alvin realizes that the positive effects of his own original skills, like STR High, are gone as well. Melina announces the end of the staged scene, and Alvin acknowledges her. The Dryad promises their deaths will inspire her next masterpiece. The illusion shatters and the boss's true name is revealed, Dusk Dryad Mural Maker. The party stands ready as the real fight begins. Alvin shouts for the party to stick to the basics as the battle commences. Internally, he feels the unnerving weight of his sword, wondering just how much power the skill restriction has cost him. Alvin is surprised to see the Dryad's branches can attack. He realizes in shock that the attack wasn't aimed at him as it splatters on the ground. A fiery explosion erupts from the point of impact. Heat salamanders emerge from the flames. Alvin realizes the boss's strategy is to summon other monsters to fight alongside her. Tet excitedly explains his theory: the red fruit creates red monsters. Melina recalls the 5 colors of fruit mentioned in the flavor text: red, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Tet is relieved to receive buffs from Kakoru, confirming that magic is still usable. Kakoru promises to keep them buffed, and Alvin smiles, remembering her limitless MP. The party decides to focus on the summoned lackeys while ignoring the main boss. Alvin charges in, and his attacks connect with the salamander. Alvin identifies the monster's weak point as its snout. He leaps in, hoping to deal enough damage to stagger it. To his shock, his powerful blow has no effect, and the creature remains unfazed. After a prolonged struggle, Alvin finally defeats one salamander, noting how much effort it took due to his weakened state. He turns to see another salamander lunging towards him. The new salamander launches a fireball. Finding it difficult to dodge, Alvin decides to knock it aside. He instinctively attempts to use his parry skill. He realizes his critical mistake a moment too late. The fireball slams into Alvin, knocking him off balance. He sees the salamander preparing its next attack, knowing he is vulnerable. Just in time, a dagger flies past him towards the monster. Tet's dagger strikes the salamander, saving Alvin from the follow-up attack. Tet apologizes, admitting his daggers are not very effective, but Alvin is just grateful that it worked. Alvin remembers that Tet's dagger throwing is also a skill, meaning he is also fighting at a disadvantage. Alvin grimaces, realizing he's so accustomed to using parry that he forgot it was a skill. A blue, water-like substance drips from above. The party spots the new threat materializing. The blue fruit crashes to the ground, summoning a new monster that is sent flying by the force of its own creation. Tet shouts in surprise as the new creature appears. Melina notes that with her skills neutralized, she couldn't launch the projectile very far. Tet wonders aloud if this skill-nullifying rule is the reason all previous parties have failed. Alvin agrees, reasoning that powerful high-level adventurers would be crippled by the loss of their skills. Melina observes Kakoru's swift and efficient support. Alvin notes that thanks to Kakoru's buffs, their stats have returned to normal values. Melina urges caution, still worried about their situation. Melina asks Tet how long he's been an adventurer, surprised he knows so little about healers. She explains that buffs and healing spells also draw enemy enmity. Tet understands that Kakoru's constant buffing is making her the primary target. A green fruit is destroyed, summoning new monsters. Massive elder mandrakes rise from the ground. Tet marvels at their size, but Alvin senses the immediate danger and shouts for him to be careful. One of the mandrakes immediately grabs Tet, who cries out in surprise. Alvin rushes forward to help his ensnared teammate. Kakoru remembers that an elder mandrake's roar is a close-range attack. Alvin yells out a warning that the roar causes instant petrification. He leaps in front of Tet to block a follow-up strike. Alvin takes the full force of the blow, the impact shattering the ground around him. He is sent stumbling to his knees. Struggling to recover, Alvin admits how tough the fight is, lamenting that he could have parried the roars if he were at full strength. He sees that everyone's movements are sluggish and realizes that if they continue to fight as they're used to, they are doomed. He concludes his thought with grim certainty: if they only focus on what they've lost, they are going to lose this battle.